everybody. Welcome back to Anime Base versus Gamer. This is episode 5. Wow, 5 episodes in. Doesn't feel like it's been that much. But yep, welcome back, everybody. This is Hikifuji coming to you all for episode 5. And with me, I have, as always.
Hi everyone, glad to hear you back, be back. I'm Sakura. I hope everybody had a really lovely spring season, at least in the northern hemisphere. It was spring. The cherry blossoms were out, as my name suggests. I had a really good time blossoming and turning into a new chapter. And looking forward to episode number 5, or new topic, which I'm gonna let Hikisugi introduce it to us, and then we'll get started.
All right, thanks for that, Sakura. But without further ado, I'll just go ahead and jump right into things. So for today, I think we were going to talk about what we call the future of otaku culture. And where we think it's heading, maybe some of the good things that we think are coming through it, maybe some of the not so good things.
The future of otaku culture can be pretty much anything, and we are in a I feel like every generation thought they were interchanging generation, but I do feel like after everything that has transpired in the last 3 years, there is definitely this wave of change, not only socially and culturally, but the otaku culture. It's very much on the cusp of it. I'll let you get started.
All right. So the first thing that I kind of want to touch on, because it's such a broad topic, but the first one, I guess, just to get the ball rolling, is streaming. Anime streaming and just streaming services in general, and how much that has kind of changed otaku culture, specifically within the time in terms of the anime side of things.
This is a very hot topic because streaming services are basically, they're the new future, right? The environment that the pandemic created kind of literally propelled forward even more the acceleration of streaming services, and now pretty much you can find everything on streaming services. And I found that anime specifically was propelled in such a way to be even more accessible than it was 10 years ago with this. Because you would think that, movies, television sitcoms, and sitcoms and things like that were they're obvious things. But anime is not such an obvious thing to attach. I think the waters were already brewing for it to happen before anime got more visibility on the mainstream audience.
I think the culture shift really helped a lot in terms of how streaming became more mainstream, and it really propelled anime. And then the pandemic happens.
It's not taboo anymore.
Yeah, and then the pandemic happens, which makes it even it accentuates
Everybody's
that even
at
more.
home,
yeah.
So they
it's
need
well,
to
I have nothing to do. I might as well try this thing out that they've been telling me to try
let
out.
me check this anime that my friend said I would like,
and then you have things that within that realm that exploded in popularity, aka Attack on Titan becoming such a huge icon. That's a huge milestone in terms of pushing anime towards the mainstream. And even I'm thinking even on the video game side of things, when the pandemic hit, at the same time or pretty close to the same time was also when Animal Crossing came out, which
oh god,
yeah, Animal Crossing, the newest Animal Crossing.
I fell into that trap, you guys.
I know, it's you of all people, the person who I practically have to beg her to play a video game, fell into the Animal Crossing sinkhole.
I was one of the last people to get a Switch Lite at my retail place because they were all sold out throughout. This was 2020. I was so bored with my life. I got into Animal Crossing and I bought one of the last Switch that was available in my area. I do not regret it. It was a good purchase. I have it. I'll be honest, I'm not a gamer, so I don't use it a lot, but it's a really good
But it's like
thing
the
to have.
introduction, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
and
kind of amazing that it was sort of like a perfect storm, right? Like as
that's
things
what
were
I'm
like setting
saying.
up, things were like setting up for this, and then the pandemic sort of like was the catalyst, the switch that sort of
Propelled.
like pushed everything forward.
I mean, honestly, there's again, I don't think this just happened overnight, and
Mhm.
everybody's like, oh shoot, like everybody is into gaming now, and they all have a Switch, or everybody is into anime now, and everybody has like one anime that they like in their list of favorites on their streaming service. Crunchyroll has been promoting their anime on their streaming side for what, 15
Yeah.
years,
It's
like
it's
for
been a
15
while. It's
years.
been a
I'm not
while.
sure. It's been a moment. And I think that with the new generation and the social culture shift of acceptance and like you do you boo and no worries, like you can be as much as an otaku as you want and we're cool with that. And everybody's like, oh crap, okay, cool, like I can do it. Like I thought I was too old for this or
Mhm.
too young for this or
Whether you wouldn't understand it or something, right?
and I wouldn't understand. And then you experience it, and you're like, okay, I can appreciate this. I do see, the world. It's never going to be perfect. There are always going to be people that will still judge and will still be like looked down a little bit at people that watch anime or that like it
Mhm.
to an otaku level.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do feel like it's not as bad.
Yeah, I think it's kind of because of the cultural shift that has been
Mhm.
happening gradually. I mean, if you look at video games, think about it. Like there used to be a time where like video games were so weird and niche and
Mhm.
nerdy and had such a like
Absolutely.
absolutely trashy, horrible
Mhm.
reputation, and now it's like
Mhm.
if you have a phone, you're a gamer. Like whether you even realize it or not, they're
And I
so
do have a
they're barely
question for you
considered geek
though.
culture now. Like video games are
I do
barely
have
considered geek
yeah,
culture.
I do have a question for you though
Yeah.
because I think it's so funny that you're saying like there was a time where video games were like such a niche, back in
Mhm.
80s, like 90s, like you're like our parents didn't get it. But let's just be
Yeah.
real. They're like, what the hell is that? Like you
Yeah.
cannot make a life out of that.
Yeah.
Why are you wasting your time? Do you see the progression that anime is having and its this momentum as pretty much the same progression that video games had, and then do you think it will get to that point in the future for anime where video games are just kind of like a normal regular thing that people like you said, they have a phone, they're gamers? Do you think anime will pass that threshold? I'm very curious about your opinion for that.
That's a tough question because the mediums are different, like the biggest thing games have on them is that they're interactive. And I
Mhm.
think that helped video games a lot in terms of acceptance and just in terms of like becoming what it is now in terms of being mainstream and just sort of normalized. I think anime still has a ways to go to get to that point. I can see the potential to get there, but at the end of the day, like I look at it and it's like I can see it, but it's always gonna have this, shall I say, more niche, lesser known side to it. Anime is very closely tied to Asian culture, and it's a very different beast from us. Whereas like video games have been, for the most part, they've been international pretty much since their inception. Like, sure, you could argue that Japan had a head start on that, and like as a
They
whole,
definitely had a big influence for
yeah,
sure. I mean, Nintendo is still pretty much with
yeah,
us, and it's felt in every corner of the
mhm.
gaming world. They're how big, prominent, and what a big impact they have in the gaming industry for sure.
I think if I were to like sum it up, I think that otaku culture in general really, it's kind of walking the same steps that video game culture is walking. It's just a little behind and it might be a bit more difficult, perhaps I'm wrong, but it might be a bit more difficult for it to get fully accepted and fully integrated into like
Mm.
what we call the mainstream just because of its nature, of it being so different. But I mean that's also something we celebrate about anime, it's like no matter how mainstream it gets, you can always find some of the weirdest and most niche, like what the heck, Japan,
I mean,
moments. Yeah,
honestly, that's
that's
kind of the
kind of
best
part
part.
of it. So we celebrate
So
that. Yeah.
that's those are my type of ones. Have you ever heard of this? And you're like,
Yeah.
what? I never. I only know Naruto. It's like you're missing
Yeah.
out, dude. You're missing out.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand your perspective. I do have one last question regarding this. If you think it's going to be hard because it's such a niche and it's like a little bit of a different beast, especially because it comes from like it's very much Japan centered anime. What do you think it would take for anime to break from that?
I can think up of an example, and that's kind of like for video games. I think that threshold more or less kind of happened, and I guess this is debatable,
Mm.
but whatever, this is my opinion. For me, it kind of happened with video games when Nintendo released the Wii. That was the
Interesting.
threshold. Say what you want to say. It was extremely successful, but it was
Mm.
also tailored for a casual, normalized audience at the end of the day. It was meant to be mainstream, and that was the moment, at least for me personally, when video games really kind of like broaden themselves from this like specific culture that like is was amazing and it still is amazing to a
Yeah.
more broader audience. So if I was
Because the
gonna
we
put
introduced Wii Sports, right? So a
yeah
lot of
yeah
people did it for like exercising,
mhm
just or
yeah,
just like only like
and that was
doing
like the
like actual
beginning.
sports.
Yeah. If I'm
Mm.
going to give some sort of example that applies to anime, the closest thing I can think of would be a show that is normalized for a Western audience but still have that
Mhm.
anime flavor. If you put a gun to my head, I would say maybe like Attack on Titan might be the closest thing I can think of.
I think anime needs two things. They need a vehicle, and that means like someone like Nintendo that thinks outside the box and creates like a show that caters to more than just otakus, but
Mhm.
incorporates the essence of anime, and someone that has a brilliant idea that will provide that. Now that I'm processing what you were saying, I do think this is a very difficult path for anime to walk.
I'm not even
Um,
honestly, I'm not even sure what kind of anime or show would even work.
yeah, I don't know. Like I'm gonna be
Honestly,
completely honest.
yeah, it's hard.
Anime is my baby, so I'm a little bit of like, don't touch it, just don't ruin it, and that's how I felt about live action too, which I honestly thought was the vehicle to make that leap that gaming had with the Nintendo Wii, and was like everybody can now watch it and understand it, and then they'll come back to the anime. I think it definitely has left its mark, but I don't think that was the one.
Well, we're on that because this is actually a really good jumping off point. VR, AR, VTubing, and animatubers.
So I'm gonna like give you a little bit of perspective of how on my side of the world, I think I'd said in this podcast before that I come from the fashion side. We already use VR. Same thing as it with the streaming services. It was accelerated due to the pandemic.
Mhm. Mhm.
VR was the response for a lot of things on my side of the world, and we are still actively using it. So I already experienced it in a business level and experienced on a personal level. I had the pleasure of putting the goggles and doing my work for some of the events with the VR and the team that takes care of that. The experience is very unique. It's nothing that I could describe it. It makes complete sense that again it got accelerated and propelled even faster for people to digest and understand it and be open-minded about it and incorporate it.
I've done VR a couple of times. It's an amazing experience. Now, it's not the one thing I could say is that it's not very engaging. And what I mean by that is that every time that I've experienced it, it's like usually very short little like interactive experiences like the roller coaster one, I did that one. And then I've done a couple of like shooting ones, like just like shooting some stuff that's coming your way.
Have you experienced it with other people, like on
I
like?
have, yeah, I have.
Okay,
Like I've experienced it with other people and it's pretty cool.
this is going to be a little bit of a wild idea, but you know how like back in the day people used to see like movies in their cars.
Like
Yeah.
drive-in movie
I feel
theaters.
like I feel like we might have I have this vision in my head of people just watching a movie on the VR setting.
I honestly
But
don't know, but like it would be an interesting to have like
I
a
just mean like going
virtual theater, right? The biggest thing that's probably holding back VR is just how cumbersome it can be. Because I know it's like a lot of setup, and that's kind of like my biggest issue with it is that it's like you require a lot of setup, and things have to be just right for the experience to work. If even one thing is like slightly off, then it just completely like just breaks everything else.
Yeah.
But I actually had some questions regarding VTubers. Since it's definitely a more sort of anime focus, it's kind of weird. I wanted to know like what your general knowledge and thoughts are on VTubers. I don't know how familiar you are because I know you tend to drive more into the classic, but like VTubers are pretty heavily influenced, at least the ones I know are pretty heavily influenced in anime, since most of them are usually like some type of anime avatars. So I wanted to get your thoughts on it. And
for our general audience, you might have to explain what a VTuber is.
effectively, a VTuber is like a blogger, like think like Philly DeFranco or any other like YouTuber, but they're using software to hide their face and hide like who they really are, like human self, and they're replacing it with a virtual avatar, and it's almost always some type of anime avatar.
Is this in Japan, very big in Japan, or
I
have
mean,
you
I
seen
think
like a
it's been a thing.
Western
I think
audience for it?
I feel like it's been a thing in Japan more than anything.
I feel like these are the second generations of the ones that sing. They're like computer generated
Vocaloids.
singers.
Yeah, Vocaloids.
Vocaloids.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Yeah, to think of it like that, but it's an actual person, not like just a computer. Like it's an actual real person, a virtual avatar.
Yeah. This is very, very, very niche. Of everything we talked about the future of otaku, this is the most otaku of all.
Yeah. I'm just mostly bringing it up because since we both watched Trash Taste, it's an otaku podcast similar to us, but way, way, way bigger. Anyway, since we both watch it and they've done collaborations with multiple VTubers, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that as a...
They have their audience, and yeah. I understand why they definitely got so, like, famous. To be fair, I don't interact with any of them. I do have seen some of the Trash Taste episodes with them. It's like following your favorite musician or following your favorite actor or celebrity, but virtually. In terms of like future, I don't think it represents the otaku culture. I think we will see other things come up. I think this is just a natural progression. Yeah, I don't know. I think
like,
that
for me, it's sort of like I see it as a sort of interesting experiment, if you would.
It
to
is.
kind of
I see that.
See how comfortable people can become with something that isn't real. It has a real person behind it, but like there's like a slice of it that's kind of like tied to the person's personality, but that's about it. And
yeah,
I'm just kind of like curious to see how far it goes and like where
it's so
where
funny.
It leads.
It's so funny because it's wow, like I'm going back to like our first podcast, which is like what it means to be an otaku. The original meaning of it that was like a shut-in in Japan that didn't interact with anyone. It's kind of funny like how do you like that person can be a shut-in but be a virtual avatar and be like completely different.
Maybe it's because it's easier for them to just hide who they are in order to show who they really are, if that even makes sense.
For some people, it might be a really good way to express themselves without
fear of judgment
or rejection, or even just a social experiment for them, and they need, like, I don't know, like closure or somebody who shares the same ideas, or they feel connected in some shape and form. Yeah.
If there's one thing to note about otaku culture is that it's always been a place where I'll just say niche and weirdos can kind of just be themselves, But I did actually kind of wanted to jump from this one to like a different one that's kind of within the same realm. The effect that like social media has had on otaku culture. I just kind of wanted to get your input on it, like how much it's like shifted.
I wouldn't say it has shifted. I think it's become, again, like everything else we discussed from the beginning, more mainstream and accepted. I think social media, it's basically the highway of every single interaction that we do. I think it's the reason why anime has all of those elements that have made it even more mainstream and accessible to people. I remember that after we had our conversation about like anime fashion, I went into TikTok out of curiosity.
Sure.
And I saw a bunch of people doing videos of like dressing up in a very cool way, in an actual fashionable, trendy, cool way, inspired by anime characters. And I was like really, really surprised and inspired. But again, social media is the highway. It's the place where you connect. And I do think that the same thing will happen with VR. So everything will filter through there. Same thing with like streaming, like have you catched a new show, like they're doing like a live action out of it, or whatever it is that they decide to do in the future.
It's kind of interesting that it's like reality has become actual reality TV.
Oh, absolutely.
Bloggers and the YouTubers and VTubers and all these people who aren't doing any sort of like acting in a movie. They don't have like a series, like a TV series or anything like that. They're just people interacting with other people just because it's fun and they enjoy it and they want to do it. Even though it's all virtual and it's all like online, it feels real, and it feels more real than like what you would call reality TV, which is it's incredibly ironic. But I also wanted to touch on that a little bit about cons.
I think there's a few established conventions that are not going to go away. E3, which is like the biggest, it's just going to be E3 standalone convention once a year, and then companies will probably independently release things on their own time virtually. There's still an appetite for in-person, which is why I know that those big conventions are not going anywhere.
I was actually even thinking that the integration of VR to have virtual reality conventions, like for sure, like when it comes to like conventions, because people would just like put on your VR headset and then you can literally just walk around the convention.
Especially because that will need a collaboration. I do feel that it's going to be, a lot of people think that, it's just going to be, we're all going to be living in the virtual reality world. We're not going to interact. No.
Gonna go full Sword Art Online on us.
Full Sword Art Online. Absolutely not. We're not getting there anytime soon. But I can tell you that it's going to be the two worlds kind of merging.
Like in that case, let's jump the gun to like the last little snippet that we kind of want to touch on before we close things out for this episode. How far and how fast anime is being made now? Because because like it's no secret that we have seasonal anime now, seasonal shows, and it's like there's a lot of shows now. Where like when we were growing up, that wasn't a thing, you know. You take what you can get, but now it's like there's so much of it, and I wanted to like get your input on it.
Can I say
Hang on, okay, but like what I wanted to do is like get your input on it, because it's like, do you think it's gonna get to a point where it's kind of like in the same area as video games? Because like now even like simple video games take like years to develop, let alone something like a AAA game that takes like 5 to 10 years. Do you think like that anime is kind of like walking down that same path, where it's like right now we have a ton, but like then you're gonna be like, there's like 5 anime to watch this season because they take 4 or 5 years to animate or something ridiculous like that?
Yes and no. Yes, because there's so much you can do in terms of like, what's your limit? How much can you produce so fast that the quality, you really literally like run people dead because they're so exhausted.
Like crunch and like animators are just struggling as it is.
So I don't know how long they can physically take. No is if how people consume anime, and that's the problem, because I do think
like media and entertainment in general.
Media, not even media. I'm gonna touch into something that this even translates into dating, which is even worse.
Yeah.
People do not connect. They're like fast. They make judgments fast. They consume media fast. They're like on to the next thing. They don't really like. They have very short attention span, and this is this is a problem that is not just anime focused. This is a problem that's collective.
It's something that's been brought by because of the advancements in technology and how quick we have
developed. There's always a best next thing that you're like hearing about, or you want to look into it, and even myself, I, as someone who is like prides themselves as like curating the anime she watches because she doesn't have time, which is completely true. I stand by it. Because I have fallen into the fast, like that, I call it like the fast meal kind of pace. I wish I could tell you the outcome. I really do, because I do wish we had more of the conscious shows we did back in the day, which things were just like unique stories, things that were just like a little bit different, and I don't see a lot of that now.
I mean, that's just kind of that's kind of like what happens. I'll give you two examples. It's kind of like what happened with the whole isekai thing in anime, where it's like, oh, one was successful, therefore let's just keep
Right.
rehashing it and just
Milk
putting
that
one
cow
different
until
thing.
she
Yeah,
dies.
yeah.
And
But
I
there is something to
understand
be
that.
said about how that can sometimes damage the integrity and the quality of the product that you're trying to put out there.
It also stifles the creativity because you don't leave room for other people that have unique voices and unique ideas to actually be sponsored and have those ideas made into a manga or an anime. Personally, I do feel that that's the disconnect that we have in the West with, anime in Japan, because a lot of the mediums, like, I can give you like a very quick example. You don't see right now a lot of romance in anime. I'm a big shoujo fan. I love my shoujo. I have a sweet spot for it because I grew up with it. Back in the day, there were so many of them. None of them are literally taken and translated into anime. And the reason is because the prevalence is all around shonen. This is what the Western like. This is what makes the money.
I mean, if there's no money to be made, they're not gonna go for it. That's pretty much what it boils down to.
But the assumption is that there's no money to be made. Most of the shoujo in Japan had a lot of live action instead of going to anime, and they make their money back. So it's just
I feel like that also makes more sense for them. Like a live action is kind of like tailored more towards that side. Whereas like the shonen is so fantastical sometimes that it's kind of hard to like transfer that into a live action. Although they certainly try, but I don't know.
I can see your point. It doesn't even make it to the West,
Like, I mean, I think it's pretty difficult for most things to make it to the West as it is, just because of the whole culture thing and.
Yeah, and it's I would say it's a lot of like cultural things in Japan, especially. So I'm not gonna fault them for not taking an international gamble into translating a lot of like shoujo mangas and like into live actions that might eventually make it into the West. But I do more in the fact that there was more freedom 7 years ago to take those chances.
That's kind of what I was gonna get on. That it's like it's kind of part of the idea of anime becoming mainstream. Think about Marvel, right? Think about the like OG, Marvel comics and DC comics. Like, that was a geek culture. That was very niche. And then, Disney came along and made it extremely mainstream, where it's basically impossible to like not see Marvel or like Star Wars or whatever. It's like it's become part of the culture. It's become mainstream.
And you cannot.
And if you ask like the hardcore fans who've been there for the comics and buy the original comics, you can ask them, it's like, oh yeah, like the way they did this is completely different from the comics, and the comics make it do it way better. And it's kind of like the same retelling with anime. It's like the originals are like the baseline, and then they just kind of like switch it enough so that it has more general appeal, if you want to give it that much credit.
Yeah. For sure. And then it's kind of tricky because you're like, in one way, you're like, oh, this is really cool that people like understand what anime is. And they're like receptive for it because they kind of know it. It's the same thing that this, like you said, Disney did to Marvel. But the thing is, like, it backfired in a weird way because, I mean, it's not backfire for Disney. They're making huge amounts of mega money. But we see Marvel through the Disney lens. It's true. Everybody thinks about Marvel, thinks about what's the first thought, the movie. Nobody's thinking about the comic, and I do think that.
But that's about it.
Yeah, but those are like.
Yeah,
now
that's kind of what I'm getting at. It's like sort of like that's why I brought it as a good example for anime.
Yeah, so I do feel like in a weird way, we are the representation of what we think we are. We're the niche ones.
Yeah.
The people that saw this before anybody even like cared about it. And then I do hope, and I'm trying to be optimistic, that we do not end up conglomerated into a company.
Well, we'll see.
We'll see, because then releasing creative freedom will be, and I don't think it will happen. I think honestly, anime is such an individual medium that I don't think it will happen. And it because especially it comes from Japan, it's just like different branches of a tree. I don't think they will be able to like pile it up under like a Disney umbrella and be like, we own anime,
Nah,
like
that wouldn't.
I don't think that'll ever happen. But I do worried about how the quality of they try to replicate that Disney mentality in terms of business of like, let's just like, we have to have like three, seasons in 1 year, trying to like, capture the money before it's gone, will eventually backfire. And it has backfired because we're losing on a lot of beautiful creativity. But I think that they don't care because they're like, well, nobody cares. Nobody's talking about it. So like, we don't, sweep it under the rug. But I think it will. I think it will push them again because they're having a lot of issues keeping up the quality and keeping up. I mean, Attack of Titans got literally a lot of hellfire for quality from their animation. So you can
they had a studio change
tell
for that too. So there's that.
and you can tell right away that the conversation it sparked the fires for the conversation. It's like, are we really needing to like happen in like 24 hours instead of giving it time? Creative work is creative work, and someone who works in the creative field, it takes a lot of energy and a lot of time to produce really, good quality work. Not only that, there's a passion behind it, and you're only human, and you need to reinforce your passion in order to continue. Sometimes it's your baby and you're like, don't want anybody to look at it for like a month. So I think we need to bring back the essence and I do hope that we get back on track in the following years of like, yes, this is mainstream. It did his job of presenting anime to a wider audience and being acceptable, and this is amazing. But let's just get back into not overproducing crappy quality and the same of like, 100 of the same, and just giving a chance to, creatives to be creative.
Let people be creative. I think as long as they don't forget like the roots of where they came from, and like just like remember the originals and remember the good creative and interesting ideas that came before them, they'll always find a way to sort of like twist the new stuff so that it catches that magic still, maybe in a different way. I don't know. I think overall the future of otaku culture and anime and video games and all that good stuff, different, maybe not what we were used to, but that doesn't make it bad. I think it's heading down a path that at the very least will be interesting to see what happens. And I don't think it's terrible. I think it's a good direction, even if it's not the best or the perfect direction. So if you want to, if you want to just give out some closing thoughts before we end things off.
Yep. Look, guys, I know that's scary. Change is scary. It's very scary. But I think, change is unavoidable. It can be a small change. It can be a big change. And I would say that the future of otaku at the end, it's, whatever we decide to make it. I know a lot of people think that we might not have any kind of say in the matter because we're outside. We're just consuming and we're kind of outsiders. But people that make all of the things we discussed in the beginning, they do it for us. They want our input. And we have social media to say how much we hate it and how much we love it.
Exactly.
So use what tools you have. Use those resources. That's how they changed the Attack on Titan thing. So
it wasn't even supposed to be a full-fledged anime. They just kind of pushed it into it.
So you have the power, and the otaku future is what we make it. Is it going to be different? Yes, absolutely. That's why change happens. It's always going to be a little bit different. Probably not 100% how we will envision it. But I'm a very positive person. I'm trying to keep my things with an open mind and a little bit of positivity. So I do think we're hopefully heading into a good direction. And if not, we definitely have the power to raise our voice and create a little bit of noise and be like, hey, we don't like
the
it.
Future.
And change the future. So I'm gonna leave it at that.
For me, I think it's heading in an interesting direction. I don't know if it's a good direction or a bad direction. As someone who's more in touch with the video game side of things and the anime side of things, I can kind of see where it could go, and depending on like how people react will definitely like affect the direction that anime hits down on. But I mean, if it's anything like the video game, like where video games are heading now, I say go for it. We can make mistakes, but we'll keep pushing forward, and hopefully we'll learn. And who knows, maybe the greatest anime of all time is just around the corner and we just don't know it yet, right?
That's absolutely true, 100%. Strap in, baby, for the ride. Let's do it.
All right. Well, with that, we are done for today. I think it has been quite a while, and I know it was a little bit of a heavy and interesting topic, but hey, that's kind of what we felt about talking today. Thank you guys for joining us, and thank you for being here with us. Thank you, Sakura, for taking time of your day for this. I know we've been
Yay.
busy. But yeah,
Super, but
we'll go ahead and see you guys on episode 6 next time, hopefully. Uh, we'll see where that leads, and we'll see what we talk about on the next episode. Anything you
we'll
wanna?
leave it in. Yeah, we'll leave it a mystery so they can actually come back for the next one.
Heck yeah! All
Out of
right.
curiosity. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. We hope that this was informative, and yeah, we'll see you next time.
All right. See you next time, everybody. Bye.
Bye.